The homeless man's fingers dug into my arm so hard they left bruises. His eyes weren't crazy. They were terrified. "You die if you take that train," he whispered, his breath hot against my face. 4 hours later, I'm still on that train with the same 12 passengers, and the woman next to me just told me she's been riding since 1987. My name is Jamie Chen. I'm 29 years old, and I was supposed to be at my cousin's wedding rehearsal dinner 3 hours ago. The woman sitting across from me, Mrs. Adelaide Brennan, is knitting the same scarf she's been working on for 37 years. The businessman 2 rows ahead keeps checking a flip phone that shouldn't even have signal anymore. And the conductor who just asked for our tickets for the 4th time is wearing a uniform from 1950. Before you think I'm losing my mind, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you happened on the most ordinary Friday morning in Chicago. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because I need to know if anyone else has heard of the 11:15 train that never stops. The man who tried to warn me was Bobby Haynes. He'd been living outside Union Station for as long as anyone could remember. Security knew him by name. Commuters bought him coffee sometimes. He never asked for money, never caused trouble. He just grabbed people heading for Platform 3 every October 18th and begged them not to board the 11:15. Everyone thought he was harmless but crazy, including me. That Friday morning started like every other trip to Milwaukee I'd taken. My cousin Diane was getting married that weekend, and I was her maid of honor. We weren't just cousins, we were basically sisters. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, Diane's mom, my Aunt Rosa, took me in without hesitation. Diane and I shared a room for 6 years. She taught me how to straighten my hair, helped me with homework, and covered for me when I snuck out to my first high school party. When she moved to Milwaukee for her job at the Children's Hospital, we promised we'd see each other at least once a month. The train made it easy. 90 minutes, 5 stops, $15. I knew the route by heart. I got to Union Station at 10:45 that morning. Plenty of time to grab coffee and catch the 11:15. The station was buzzing with its usual Friday energy. Business people heading to meetings, college kids going home for the weekend, families dragging massive suitcases toward the platforms. I stopped at my usual coffee cart where Maria already had my order ready. "Large vanilla latte, extra shot," she said with a smile. "Going to see Diane again?" I nodded, tipping her $5, because she always remembered. I texted Diane while walking to Platform 3. "Got my coffee, boarding in 10, can't wait to see your dress." She texted back immediately. "Mom made tamales and enchiladas. She says you're too skinny. Also, James's groomsmen are all single, just saying." I laughed, typing back, "Stop trying to set me up at your own wedding." Her response was just a string of heart emojis. Platform 3 was less crowded than usual, maybe 24 people waiting for the 11:15. I found a spot near the front where I always stood, right by the emergency call box. That's when I felt the hand on my arm, not a tap or a gentle touch, but a desperate grab that spun me around. Bobby Haynes stood there, his weathered face inches from mine. Up close, I could see he wasn't as old as I'd thought, maybe 64, 65. His eyes were brown and clear, not clouded with mental illness or substances, just pure, crystalline fear. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Not today, not this train. Any other day, any other train, but not the 11:15 on October 18th. His fingers pressed harder into my arm. 37 years I've been trying to warn people. 37 years since my brother got on this train and never got off. They found his body, yes, but he never got off. Do you understand? He's still on that train." I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Sir, you're hurting me," I said, looking around for help. Other passengers were staring now, some pulling out phones to record. "Bobby, let the lady go," a tired voice said behind us. A security guard I recognized, Officer Martinez, approached with the exhausted patience of someone who'd done this before. "We've talked about this. You can't grab people." Bobby released my arm but didn't step back. "Tell her, Martinez. Tell her about the people who go missing. Tell her about October 18th, 1950. Tell her about the tunnel." Officer Martinez sighed, gently moving Bobby aside. "Miss, I apologize. Bobby lost his brother years ago and October bothers him. Are you okay? I nodded, rubbing my arm where I could already feel bruises forming. I'm fine, just surprised. The train pulled into the station with a grinding squeal of brakes. It looked older than usual, one of those vintage cars they sometimes used for the less popular routes. The paint was dark green instead of the usual silver and blue. Bobby made one last desperate attempt, shouting as Officer Martinez led him away. Count the passengers. Count them when you board and count them when you leave. They won't match. They never match. I boarded quickly, finding a window seat in car 3. The interior definitely showed its age. Cracked leather seats, wood paneling that had seen better days, windows that looked like they'd been cleaned with newspaper and hope. Only about a dozen other passengers in my car, all spread out, all quiet. No one was on their phone, which was weird. Even the teenage girl 3 rows up was just staring out the window instead of scrolling through TikTok. The conductor came through almost immediately. An older man in a uniform that looked like it came from a vintage store. His badge read, Mr. Gregory Vance, in that old-fashioned engraved style. When he took my ticket, his fingers were ice cold. Milwaukee? He asked, though the destination was clearly printed. Yes, I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 90 minutes. 5 stops. Enjoy your journey, Miss Chen. I hadn't told him my name. I pulled out my laptop to review my presentation for Monday, trying to shake off the weird morning. Diane texted again. Let me know when you're close. I'll be in the cell phone lot. I sent her a thumbs up and settled in for what I thought would be a normal train ride. Outside the window, Chicago started sliding away, the skyline shrinking as we headed north. The familiar rhythm of the rails should have been soothing. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. But something was off about it. The pattern was wrong somehow, like a heartbeat with an extra chamber. The woman across the aisle, Mrs. Brennan, looked up from her knitting. She had the kind of face that belonged in old photographs, pleasant but distant. Her dress was navy blue with white polka dots, the kind my grandmother would have called Sunday best. She smiled at me, and her lips moved like she was about to say something. Then she stopped, shook her head slightly, and went back to her knitting. The scarf she was working on pooled in her lap, far too long for any practical use. It had to be at least 20 feet of perfect green yarn, row after row of identical stitches. I checked my phone. 11:30. We should be approaching the first stop soon. Glenview was only 15 minutes from Chicago. I looked out the window for familiar landmarks. The old water tower should be coming up on the right. Then the shopping complex. Then the station. But the landscape outside looked wrong. Too rural. Too empty. We'd been traveling for 15 minutes, but somehow we were passing farmland that shouldn't exist this close to the city. A red barn appeared on the left. I'd never seen a barn on this route before, and I'd taken this train at least 50 times. That's when I noticed that everyone else in the car was perfectly still. Not sleeping on a train still, but mannequin still. The businessman 2 rows ahead hadn't turned a page of his newspaper in 10 minutes. The teenage girl hadn't shifted position once. Even their breathing seemed synchronized, like they were all connected to the same ventilator. Only Mrs. Brennan's hands moved, needles clicking in that same repetitive pattern. Click, click, rap, click, click, rap, click, click, rap. The sound matched the wrong rhythm of the rails perfectly, like they were part of the same broken machine carrying us toward Milwaukee. Or at least, that's where I thought we were going. The first hour passed without us stopping at Glenview. I kept checking my phone, watching the minutes tick past 11:45, then noon, then 12:15. We should have made 2 stops by now. My GPS app showed we were moving, but the location kept jumping around like the satellite couldn't figure out where we were. 1 second we'd be near Evanston, the E. Next, we'd be back in Chicago, then suddenly north of Waukegan. None of it made sense. I stood up to find the conductor, but my legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. The aisle stretched longer than it should have, and the fluorescent lights above flickered in a pattern that hurt to look at directly. "Excuse me," I said to Mrs. Brennan, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did we already pass Glenview? I must have missed the announcement." She looked up from her knitting, and her smile made my stomach drop. It was the kind of smile you give someone who's just received terrible news, but doesn't know it yet. "Oh dear," she said softly. "We don't stop at Glenview anymore. Haven't for quite some time." Her needles never stopped moving. "That's impossible," I said. "This is the regional line. It always stops at Glenview." She tilted her head like she was trying to remember something important. "What year do you think it is, sweetheart?" The question was so bizarre I almost laughed. "It's 2024, October 18th, Friday." Her smile grew sadder, and she looked down at her endless scarf. "That's what I thought too. October 18th, 1987. I was going to my daughter's graduation. She was getting her nursing degree, first in our family to finish college." She held up the scarf, and I could see years of work in those stitches. "I started this for her. Thought I'd finish it on the train. Still working on it." My chest tightened as I looked around the car. Really looked this time. The businessman's newspaper was dated March 3rd, 2003. The headline read something about weapons inspectors in Iraq. The teenage girl's Letterman jacket had "Class of 1995" embroidered on the back. A mother 3 rows behind me was holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. But when I looked closer, the bundle was empty. She just rocked it back and forth, humming a lullaby to nothing. I pulled out my phone to call Diane, but there was no signal, not even emergency calls only. The screen showed full bars, but every call failed immediately. I tried texting. "Something's wrong with the train. Can't explain. If you don't hear from me, tell Aunt Rosa I love her." The message just sat there with the sending icon spinning endlessly. I stood up and walked toward the front of the car, where the conductor had gone. Each step felt like pushing through thick air, and the other passengers watched me with those sympathetic, knowing looks. "Tickets, please," a voice called out behind me. I turned around, and there was Mr. Vance, even though I'd just seen him walk the opposite direction. "You already checked my ticket," I said. He smiled that same sad smile everyone seemed to have. "Tickets, please," he repeated. My hand moved on its own, reaching into my pocket, pulling out the ticket I'd already shown him. He punched it again, the hole appearing in a spot that had already been punched. "Milwaukee," he said. 90 minutes. 5 stops." I grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. My hand went right through him like he was made of cold mist. He solidified again, looking at me with something between pity and resignation. "You're new," he said quietly. "It takes time to understand. Look outside, Miss Chen. Really look." I turned to the window and saw that red barn again, the same one we'd passed 45 minutes ago. Same broken fence, same rusty tractor in the field. We were going in circles, or loops, or something my brain couldn't process. "We're not moving forward, are we?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Vance adjusted his cap, and I noticed the date on his badge. October 18th, 1950. "We're always moving, Miss Chen. Just not in the direction you think. The train needs passengers to exist. One from each year. You're 2024. Welcome aboard the Eternal 1115. He walked away, and this time I didn't try to stop him. I sank into the nearest seat, my legs finally giving out. The woman next to me, elderly with silver hair and perfect pin curls, patted my hand. "The first day is always the hardest," she said. "I'm Dorothy, 1963. I was going to my son's wedding." She pulled out a wedding invitation from her purse, still crisp and white after 60 years. "Never made it, but I like to think he had a beautiful ceremony." I looked at my phone again. Diane had texted, but the timestamps were all wrong. "Where are you?" showed as sent 3 hours ago, even though I'd only been on the train for 90 minutes. "The rehearsal is starting" was marked as 6 hours old. "Jamie, please answer" was dated yesterday. Time wasn't working right. Nothing was working right. And somewhere in the back of my mind, Bobby's words echoed over and over. "Count the passengers when you board and count them when you leave. They won't match. They never match." I refused to accept this insanity. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone had drugged my coffee. Maybe this was an elaborate prank or some kind of immersive theater experience. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything, even without signal. If nothing else, there would be evidence of whatever this was. The other passengers watched me with that same pitying expression, like they'd all been where I was now, fighting against the impossible truth of our situation. I went row by row, introducing myself to each passenger and asking them direct questions. Tom Walsh, the businessman, claimed he'd boarded in 2003 on his way to a job interview at Abbott Labs that would have doubled his salary. The teenage girl, Jessica, said it was 1995 and she was heading to Northwestern for a campus tour. Each person had the same story pattern. They'd boarded the 11:15 on October 18th of their respective years, and none of them had ever arrived at their destination. When I asked them why they didn't just get off at the next stop, they all gave the same hollow laugh. "What stop?" Tom said. "Show me a platform. Show me doors that actually open. Show me a world outside those windows that isn't the same 3 landmarks on." Repeat. I started taking detailed notes in my phone, creating a map of what I was seeing. The red barn appeared every 77 minutes. The water tower with Racine painted on it showed up 33 minutes after the barn. Then came a distinctive railroad crossing with a yellow house beside it, exactly 22 minutes after the water tower. Then the Kenosha Tunnel, dark and impossibly long, where something strange happened with the windows. After the tunnel, the cycle repeated. 77 minutes, 33 minutes, 22 minutes, tunnel, over and over like a broken record. Mrs. Brennan moved to sit beside me, her knitting needles still working that endless scarf. "You're trying to solve it," she said. "We all did at first. Marcus brought a compass in 1978. It just spun in circles. Jennifer tried breaking a window in 1992. Her hand went right through the glass, but the window stayed solid. Paul attempted to pull the emergency brake in 2001. You can see him trying it right now if you look." She pointed to a man at the front of the car, his hand pulling desperately at a red handle that wasn't moving. "He's been pulling that brake for 23 years. Sometimes I think he's the lucky one. At least he still has hope. There has to be a way out," I insisted. "Every system has a flaw. Every prison has a weakness." Mrs. Brennan's needles clicked faster. "Oh, there is a way out, dear. But you won't like it. You have to wait for your replacement. Someone who boards on October 18th of a future year. Someone who ignores the warning just like you did. Then you can leave. But you don't go home. You become like Bobby, standing at the station, grabbing arms, begging people not to board, watching them ignore you year after year." The train entered the Kenosha Tunnel again, and I pressed my face against the window. In the darkness, I could see another train passing us in the opposite direction, not beside us, but somehow occupying the same space, like 2 films overlapping. I could see through their windows, and my blood turned to ice. It was us, the same passengers, the same car, but moving backward while we moved forward. I saw myself pressed against the window, looking back at me with the same horrified expression. "Do you see it now?" Mrs. Brennan asked. "We're not just trapped on a train. We're trapped in a moment, a splice in time that keeps folding over itself." I stood up and walked to the bathroom, needing to splash water on my face, needing to think. The bathroom door opened easily, but inside was wrong. The mirror showed not my reflection, but the bathroom of a modern train, clean and updated, with a figure washing their hands. They looked up, and I saw my own face, but older, grayer, with eyes that had given up decades ago. "No," I said out loud. "This isn't happening." I slammed the door and stumbled back to my seat. "I'm going to figure this out," I announced to the car. Some passengers laughed. Others just stared. Tom Walsh looked up from his perpetually unread newspaper. "I said the same thing 21 years ago. Had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage. Spent what felt like years trying every possible solution. Eventually you realize the only solution is acceptance. The train needs us to exist, and we need the train to exist. It's symbiotic, parasitic. Call it whatever makes you feel better." I pulled out my notebook again and started writing down everything Bobby had said at the station. He'd mentioned October 18th, 1950, the tunnel. His brother, Mr. Vance the conductor, had the same date on his badge. There was a connection there, something about the original event that started all this. I walked back to Mr. Vance, who was standing at the front of the car, swaying with the motion of the train. "Tell me about 1950, I said. "Tell me what really happened." He turned to look at me, and for the first time, someone on this train looked genuinely surprised. "You're different," he said. "Most people take days to start asking the right questions. Some never do." He pulled out an old photograph from his pocket, edges worn from decades of handling. It showed a group of railway workers standing in front of a train, the same green paint as ours. October 18th, 1950, the inaugural run of the new express line, 43 passengers, including my crew. We were so proud. The tunnel had just been completed, cutting 20 minutes off the journey to Milwaukee. He paused, his translucent fingers tracing the faces in the photograph. The tunnel collapsed. Not completely, just enough to trap us in a pocket. They say we died instantly from the pressure change, but that's not true. We had 3 hours. 3 hours in the dark, feeling time start to bend around us. Something about the electromagnetic fields in that tunnel, the weight of the earth above us, the precise angle of the track, it created something that shouldn't exist. A loop, a fold, a place where October 18th never ends. He put the photograph away and looked at me with eyes that held 74 years of exhaustion. The train keeps running because it doesn't know it's supposed to stop, and every year, it needs a new passenger to maintain the energy. The physics of it would drive you mad if you understood it. Better not to try. The train entered the Kenosha Tunnel again, but this time I was ready. I pressed my phone's flashlight against the window, trying to see through the darkness. The other train appeared, that parallel version moving in reverse, and I found myself staring at my own face again. But this time, I noticed something different. My double was mouthing words, desperately trying to communicate. I pressed closer, trying to read her lips, and then I understood. She wasn't saying words. She was counting. 1, 2, 3, over and over. That's when Mrs. Brennan's hand grabbed mine, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked so fragile. "Now you see it," she said, her voice different now, clearer and more urgent than before. "We're not on a train, dear. We are the train. Every one of us who didn't listen to the warning, we became part of its consciousness, its energy source." The tunnel ended, and sunlight flooded back in, but something had changed. I could see through the walls slightly, like they were made of thick glass. Beyond them was another layer of the train, and another beyond that, endless versions stacked like Russian dolls. "Every October 18th, the membrane gets thinner," Mrs. Brennan continued. "The train needs exactly one person from each year to maintain its existence. No more, no less. It's not random. It chooses people with unfinished business, people who were rushing towards something important." Mr. Vance appeared beside us, and now I could see completely through him to the seats behind. "The original 43 souls from 1950 power the engine," he said. "We're the core. Everyone else, you're all carriages added to an infinite train. The physics are impossible because physics don't apply here. We exist in a wound in reality that won't heal." He pulled out a maintenance log from his pocket, pages filled with dates and names going back decades. "Every passenger is logged. Every year is accounted for. You're number 37. There have been 37 October 18ths since the accident. 37 warnings ignored. 37 people who thought they knew better than the crazy man at the station." My phone suddenly exploded with notifications, all at once, like a dam bursting. Texts from Diane, hundreds of them, each time-stamped impossibly. "Where are you?" From 1 hour ago. "The rehearsal is starting." From 3 hours ago. "Jamie, you're scaring me." From 6 hours ago. "They found your phone on an empty train." From 2 days ago. "We're holding your memorial tomorrow." From 1 week ago. "I miss you so much." From 1 month ago. "It's been a year, Jamie." From 1 year ago. I scrolled through them in horror, watching my life fast forward without me. Diane's wedding happening without her maid of honor. My job sending termination papers. My apartment being cleared out. My funeral service at St. Mary's with a closed casket because they never found a body. "But I'm here," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm still here. These texts prove time is passing outside. There has to be a way to communicate, to get back." Tom Walsh laughed bitterly from his seat. "Check the dates on those messages more carefully." I looked again and my heart sank. They were all dated October 18th. Different years, but always October 18th. The train exists in every October 18th simultaneously, he explained. Past, present, and future. Your cousin is getting those messages on every October 18th she lives through. One per year, like clockwork. She'll get one every year until she dies, always wondering, never understanding. Mrs. Brennan stood up suddenly, her knitting falling to the floor. But there's something else, she said, looking out the window with an expression I'd never seen before. Hope. Look at the platform. We were passing through what looked like Union Station, but not quite. It was hazier, less solid, like looking at it through frosted glass. And there, on platform 3, stood Bobby, but not alone. Beside him were dozens of translucent figures, all reaching out toward the train, all mouthing warnings no one could hear. Those are the ones who got off, Mrs. Brennan whispered. The ones who found their replacements. They don't get to go home, Mr. Vance said quietly. They become the warning, living ghosts at the station, visible only to those who might listen, screaming truths that sound like madness. Bobby's been there since 1987 when his brother finally found a replacement. His brother was on the original train, survived 37 years on this loop before someone took his place. And Bobby's been trying to save others ever since, knowing that every person who boards despite his warning extends someone else's imprisonment by another year. The horrible mathematics of it hit me all at once. 37 years Bobby had been warning people. 37 people had boarded anyway. We weren't random victims. We were replacements, each of us freeing someone who'd been trapped for decades, dooming ourselves to the same fate. Who did I replace? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mrs. Brennan smiled that sad smile one more time. Me, dear. I've been waiting since 1987. 37 years of knitting this scarf, watching that barn pass 10,000 times, counting the minutes between landmarks. You're my freedom, and I'm so very sorry. She started to fade, becoming more translucent with each passing second. Wait, I called out. How long do I have? When will my replacement come? She was almost gone now, just a shimmer in the air. Could be next year, could be 50 years, but they'll come. Someone always ignores the warning. Someone always thinks they know better, and when they do, you'll become another voice in the crowd at platform 3, grabbing arms and pleading with strangers who think you're crazy. She vanished completely, leaving only her knitting needles and that impossibly long scarf on the seat. I looked around the car at the other passengers, understanding now that we were all waiting for the same thing, waiting for someone to ignore Bobby's warning, to board the 11:15 on some future October 18th, to take our place in this rolling prison. Tom Walsh went back to his newspaper, the same page he'd been reading for 21 years. Jessica put her headphones on, listening to a Walkman that played the same song forever, and I sat down in Mrs. Brennan's seat, picked up her knitting needles, and started adding rows to the endless scarf. Because what else was there to do but wait and mark time in a place where time didn't exist, hoping that somewhere out there, someone was rushing to catch a train, ignoring a desperate warning, about to make the same mistake I had made. I spent what felt like months learning the rhythm of our prison. 77 minutes to the barn, 33 to the water tower, 22 to the railroad crossing, then the tunnel where all the versions of ourselves stared back like a shattered mirror reflecting infinite regret. I tried everything the others had already attempted, wrote SOS messages on the windows that no one outside could see, screamed at phantom stations where ghost passengers boarded but never noticed us, attempted to throw things off the train only to watch them reappear in my hand moments later. The train wasn't just holding us. We were part of it now, cells in an organism that fed on lost time and broken promises. The worst part was watching myself fade. First, my reflection in the bathroom mirror became translucent, like looking through dirty glass. Then, my memories started blurring at the edges. Some days, I couldn't remember if Diane was my cousin or my sister. Other days, I forgot my parents' names, just knew they'd died in something tragic involving twisted metal and sirens. The other passengers told me this was mercy, that forgetting made eternity bearable. But I didn't want mercy. I wanted to remember everything I was losing, even if it hurt. Jessica, the teenager from 1995, became my closest friend in this limbo. She'd been 17 when she boarded, excited about Northwestern, about becoming a doctor. Now she was eternally 17, while somewhere in the real world, her parents had buried an empty coffin and grown old, wondering what happened to their daughter. The hardest part, she told me one day, or year, or decade later, is knowing they never got answers. At least with a body, there's closure. We're not even mysteries anymore. We're just forgotten. Time passed strangely on the train. Sometimes a minute felt like a year. Sometimes I'd blink and Tom would tell me I'd been sitting still for 3 months. I kept adding rows to Mrs. Brennan's scarf, the repetitive motion giving me something to focus on besides the endless loop. Click, click, rap, matching the rhythm of the rails. I understood now why she'd kept knitting for 37 years. It was proof we still existed, still made choices, even if those choices were as meaningless as adding green yarn to an infinite scarf. Then one day, October 18th, 2054, everything changed. The train slowed in a way it never had before, and I felt a pull in my chest like a fishing hook being tugged. Through the hazy window, I saw Union Station's Platform 3, clearer than it had ever been. A young man stood there with earbuds in, scrolling through his phone while Bobby grabbed at his arm. The man laughed, shaking Bobby off, clearly filming him for some social media post. "Check out this crazy dude," I heard him say through the supernatural thickness between worlds. "Says I'll die if I take this train. Content gold, am I right?" The doors opened. Actually opened. For the first time since I'd boarded, I could see a way out. But I also understood the price. The moment I stepped off, someone had to step on. That young man with his phone and his mockery and his whole life ahead of him would take my place. He'd become number 38 in Mr. Vance's ledger. His family would wonder. His friends would grieve. And I'd become another ghost at the station. Another warning ignored. I stood at the door for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. The other passengers watched me. Some nodded encouragingly. Others looked away. Tom called out, "30 years is enough, Jamie. Take your freedom." But as I watched that young man board, laughing at his own cleverness, I made a different choice. I grabbed his arm from inside the train, using every ounce of whatever supernatural strength I'd accumulated. "Your mother," I said, somehow knowing things I shouldn't know. "She's sick, breast cancer, stage 2. She hasn't told you yet because she doesn't want to ruin your promotion celebration. If you get on this train, you'll never see her again. She'll go through chemo alone. She'll survive, but she'll always wonder why you disappeared the day before she needed you most." The young man's face went white. He stepped backward off the train, stumbling onto the platform. "How did you know?" he whispered. The doors started closing, and I knew I'd missed my chance. 30 years of waiting, gone in an instant of humanity. But as the train pulled away, I saw him run to Bobby, grabbing the old man's shoulders, asking him questions, finally listening. And Bobby looked right at me through the supernatural veil and nodded once, a gesture of respect between prisoners of different kinds. The train lurched forward, back into its eternal loop, and I realized something had changed. The other passengers were staring at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. "No one's ever done that before," Jessica said quietly. "No one's ever refused their freedom." Tom lowered his newspaper for the first time in decades. "You saved him. You actually saved someone." And in that moment, I understood something Bobby had figured out long ago. The real prison wasn't the train. It was the knowledge that our freedom required someone else's damnation. Bobby stood at that platform not because he had to, but because he chose to, warning everyone he could, saving who he could save. I went back to my seat and picked up the knitting needles, but something was different. The scarf began unraveling from the bottom, row by row, year by year, not disappearing, but transforming into something else. Letters, words, messages. Every row Mrs. Brennan had knitted contained a goodbye she never got to say. Every passenger's repetitive action was a final message, encoded in the routine of our prison. Tom's newspaper held love letters to his children. Jessica's music was a composition she'd been writing for her parents. We weren't just prisoners. We were living time capsules, holding on to the last pieces of ourselves for someone to find. My phone buzzed one more time. A message from Diane, dated October 18th, 2054. 30 years today, Jamie. I'm old now, retired from the hospital. I still come to the station every October 18th. That man Bobby passed away last week, but before he died, he told me the strangest thing. He said you were still on the train, still traveling, and that you'd saved someone. He said to tell you that Aunt Rosa's tamales were perfect at my wedding, and she saved you a plate in the freezer for when you come home. I don't understand what any of it means, but I choose to believe you're out there somewhere, finding your way back to us. I looked out the window as we passed the red barn for the millionth time and realized the truth. We weren't trapped. We were in transition, stuck between destinations like souls in purgatory, and every choice to warn someone, every refusal to pass on our curse, loosened the trap's grip a little more. Maybe one day, if enough of us chose sacrifice over freedom, the train would finally reach its destination. Until then, I'd keep knitting, encoding my story into green yarn, hoping someone, somewhere, would understand the warning. Don't ignore the desperate strangers. Don't dismiss the impossible. And whatever you do, never board the 11:15 train on October 18th. If this story reminded you to listen to warnings others might dismiss as crazy, hit subscribe for more true encounters with the impossible. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, especially if you've ever felt that chill of avoiding a tragedy you couldn't explain. Some guardian angels stand at train platforms, grabbing arms and speaking truths that sound like madness, until the day you realize they saved your life.